getting it in just a little bit early right here at the riverfront here in Sacramento, California. I said that I was going to come on originally at 1:30, but I decided I wanted to, I guess, do this content a little bit longer or maybe shorter, whichever. But I just wanted to start it as soon as possible. But here we are. I'm going to talk to you guys about Tyson Pedro and his recent comments about retirement, but also sort of dig into some troubling aspects of, let's say, fighter pay, or the lack of, let's say, the lack of stability that comes into being a fighter. Now, is that fair? Are these fair business practices? Or is Dana White correct about the notion that it is not a career, but rather an opportunity? And what exactly does Dana White mean by that? Well, let me explain to you guys what he means by that. You see, being a fighter, although it is something that is sort of a commodity and a demand, especially for all those that seek entertainment, you also got to understand a couple of notions about that. For one, in the fight game, not everybody watches fighting to the level that people watch the NFL or the NBA, and I don't think I'm breaking any new news when it comes to that particular notion, am I? I think there's some truth to that, but you also have to understand that in those same words of Dana White saying that it is not a career, but rather an opportunity, it is up to the fighter to take the opportunity to build themselves into a brand so that it compels people to want to come out and see them. And as a result of that, well, the one thing that a lot of people don't take into consideration is that they truly believe that if you are a fighter, you deserve everything. You deserve the world. You deserve the oysters that are coming to your way. But the problem is that's not the case. And why am I talking about that? Because Tyson Pedro, by the way, let me break down the kicks and punches of his fight with Vitor Petrino first, right? So in the first and second round, it was basically a leg kicking contest going back and forth, to which a few times they've jabbed each other. So it was basically a low kick and a jabbing fest of a fight. That was until the third round, where Petrino had used his wrestling to neutralize Tyson Pedro. Okay, here's the thing. Tyson Pedro didn't look too bad. I want to really disclose that in full confidentiality. He didn't do very bad. Okay, he didn't do bad at all. So this is not one of those things where it's a call for retirement because the guy did so horrible. That's not what it is here. What it is here is a situation where he just didn't have the financial stability to be able to go out there and train in New Zealand as he was living in Sydney, Australia, going back and forth, while also not getting the proper funds to, let's say, cultivate or continue that, based on the fact that he just recently lost. Now, as a result of this loss, the one thing you have to take into consideration is now he's losing way more money than he's actually gaining money from this career. And that is the notion and the understanding that a lot of people have to take into consideration. Tyson Pedro literally said that after this fight, I have to go and rob somebody. Whoever here has the most money in the entire room, he was talking to the audience as the media members of UFC Vegas 87, and said, hey, whoever has the most here, I'm going to go and rob them. So you see a little bit of the gang graffiti that they have over here. Just like what some of these gangs here in Northern California do, the North A's, the Bloods, the Crips, and everything and all that. These guys come from a very harsh background, so guess what? If they have to stop themselves from starving, That's what they're going to do. They're going to go and rob you. And unfortunately, Tyson Pedro, who is a professional athlete, should not have to feel like that. But as a result, he has to now make decisions about whether he wants to continue fighting or not. As opposed to Canelo, who, by the way, many of you are probably here because of Canelo, and I'm going to tell you the bright side and a positive story about this guy as opposed to Tyson Pedro and his current situation in time right now. I got to tell you guys, Canelo Alvarez is going to retire a wealthy man. There's no doubt about that. And as a result of him retiring as a wealthy man, he has to look at other fighters in the world of boxing, in the world of MMA, and see the unfair nature that has been placed upon them. But the question is it really unfair, or is it the true meaning of meritocracy? Because can we really blame anybody but Tyson Pedro, who decided, you know what, I'm going to go spend all this money to become the best and travel to New Zealand and spend all this money not knowing if it's going to come back or anything like that. So he basically made a bad investment. But at the same time, you got to understand, it's also one of those situations where it doesn't hurt to try, and God doesn't hate anybody that tries, right? So he did what he thought was the best deal for him in terms of becoming a world champion and having world champion status and having world champion caliber of training partners in New Zealand as opposed to whatever he had going on in Sydney. So he had to make a choice. But unfortunately, that choice was not lucrative. And you know what? We also have to take into consideration, it's not like this is the kind of guy that goes out there and promotes himself, right? So we got to understand that. Is he really the type of guy that puts butts in seats? And you got to objectively ask yourself if that is a reality. The unfortunate reality and the truth of the matter is that he doesn't. And the fact that Tyson Pedro does not put butts in seats is the reason why he's at the situation that he's at. And here's something you guys have to understand. That's perfectly all right. A lot of fighters are in that situation. And they're very talented people. There's a lot of them that could probably beat world champions right now, which is why Sean Strickland is exactly where he's at. He stuck it out. He decided, you know what? This isn't paying too well, but I'm going to stick out to it anyway because of the fact that he doesn't know how to do anything else. And the fact that Sean Strickland doesn't really know how to do anything else, well, it compelled him to stay and do exactly this. Tyson Pedro, on the other hand, you got to think he's probably in that same trajectory. And let me explain why. For one, you got to understand that Tyson Pedro grew up with a father who was not only a mixed martial arts fighter himself, but was also, let me give you guys a final shot of the Sacramento River before I head back into my car and continue talking to you guys. So, Tyson Pedro's dad owned a fight promotion. Okay, he owned a fight promotion. He was a fighter himself. And as a result of that, Tyson Pedro was heavily indoctrinated into the world of mixed martial arts. And rightfully so, it is the reason why the guy is a professional mixed martial artist, and he chose that as a career path because it's all that he knows. He didn't learn any other skill. He didn't learn a trade. He didn't go into a particular school setting or anything like that. What Tyson Pedro did was dedicate his whole entire life to mixed martial arts. And as a result, he was hoping that it was going to pay out. And this right here is the unfortunate incident that happens to a lot of fighters. You see, over the years, here in Sacramento, by the way, this is the home state and the city of Team Alpha Male, the famous Team Alpha Male gym, team that I've trained with, among many other gyms that are out here in Sacramento, many gyms that not a lot of people know about, but are highly talented because, let's just be honest, this great city of Sacramento right here is an absolute fight town to the fullest degree. And you can't deny the prowess and the skills that this particular region has for mixed martial arts, Muay Thai, wrestling, and all the other arts in between. That is the reality of this particular part of the world. So as a result, there's a lot of guys that come out here and train in Sacramento. They spend all their money coming from places like China, with the names of Song Yadong that come to mind. Guys like Andy Ogle, who's trained out of Wales in the UK, came out here and trained. Even Anthony Pettis and his brother, before he was a pro, came out here and trained with Team Alpha Male in Sacramento. So as a result, this is the type of place that really attracts a lot of the best fighters in the world, all thanks to the names like Uriah Faber, Chad Mendes, TJ Dillashaw, Cody Garbrandt, and the list goes on and on and on with some of the legends that come from Team Alpha Male, along with the legends or local legends that came out of here, such as James Irvin, a guy who had fought Anderson Silva at the 205 division when Anderson Silva decided he wanted to test himself. So fighting, I gotta tell you, it's a very expensive endeavor if it's not paying you back. But once again, many of that, unfortunately, is just the result of malpractice on your own promotion. That's really just what it comes down to. It is a malpractice of promotion when it comes to Tyson Pedro and not allowing himself to build, let's say, a better following or to build a better media strategy, such as maybe trying to do a podcast like this. Now, let me tell you, when I try to pursue fighting and MMA in my time, I regretted that I didn't jump on the YouTube era the way that a lot of these young guys are doing now. Paddy Pimblett, for example. This is the reason why the guy was okay with refusing to fight in the UFC very early in his career. Why? Because of the fact that, well, let's just be honest about this, okay? The guy knew that he was making way more money outside of the UFC than he was inside of the UFC. And you have to take that into high consideration, okay? There's a lot of fighters out there right now that are making way more money outside of the UFC than they are in the UFC. Whether that's Bellator, whether that's Octagon in Eastern Europe, or even if you're just fighting in Ramzan Kadyrov's promotion. I swear to you, it is that type of situation. It literally is like that. Sometimes other places pay way more money than the UFC. And if you are one of these casual fans that, well, really, they don't understand the sport. I mean, look, here's the thing. If you are a hardcore fan of the sport, you sort of understand that the UFC is the sworn pinnacle of the entire MMA game, right? In other words, you know that this is where the best fight the best, and there's no doubt about that. But if you are a casual, you also don't understand that not all of the best fight in the UFC. And also, in the business side of that, not everyone who is in the UFC is fully paid in ways that they should be paid. Or maybe the notion is that these guys are just not doing enough for their promotion. Because look, you got to think, by the way, if you guys are just joining me right now, I urge you guys to rewind back and take a look at some of the beautiful scenery that I showed you guys here in Sacramento. We're going to show you right now as we are driving. So that right there is the Golden Bridge. On the side of you right there is the Sutter Health Park. for the Sacramento River Cats, which is the local minor league team that we have here. Right here, this is where the, what is this? I believe this is some sort of, cafe, I believe, but I don't know if it's also a winery, but it's a cafe right here. And then right in front of you right here is the Riverfront Farm, okay? So a little scenery for you guys to take a look at as I'm giving you guys some talk of mixed martial arts, boxing, combat sports, and everything in between, right? So with that, you got to understand that not every fighter has a plan, but as a fighter, you also have to understand that not everybody wants to watch you. And this is one of the most common mistakes that fighters make, is that they believe that because they put in all this effort, and by the way, I gotta hand it to you and tell you the truth, mixed martial arts is the hardest sport that you will ever do. And because it is one of the hardest sport that you do, many people have this false notion to believe that, you know what, I deserve more than this. I put my life on the line. I go out there and train with some real killers that could hurt me on a daily basis. And I go out there and compete with some of the top killers in the world. So in your mind as a fighter, you truly believe that you deserve all this. Especially if you are one of those fighters that doesn't understand business. Because I gotta tell you, I know a lot of guys in the fight game that don't have a business mind. And that right there is the most unfortunate. It doesn't matter if they are high-level fighters. It doesn't matter if they are low-level fighters. It doesn't matter if they are real great fighters with high attributes or fighters with the lowest attributes. If a fighter doesn't have a business mind, they can literally go almost nowhere in this sport. And that is the reality of it. Why am I saying that? Because oftentimes, the fact that mixed martial arts comes from an Eastern tradition when it comes to, let's say, karate, jiu-jitsu, which, by the way, is an offshoot of ninjutsu, and I could go on an entire podcast, separate episode about that. But nonetheless, it has Eastern origins. Why do you think that you don't wear shoes on the mat? Well, for one, obviously that's part of the sport, but why do you think there's plenty of fight sports out there before MMA where you fight barefooted? For simple reasons of obviously safety and the fact that it is better to, I don't know, I mean, there's really no sense in why we fight in bare shins as opposed to, let's say, covering our fist up, right? Because, again, separate episode for a different reason of time, right? But the fact of the matter is, trying to be a good person, trying to express these Eastern philosophies of goodness and good karma and things of that nature. So as a result, mixed martial arts comes from a background of Eastern traditions. And with that, I'm sorry to say, when you are trying to attract a Western audience that is bloodthirsty and wants all the drama, the type of drama that you see with Krishan and Blueface and MTV and Jerry Springer and Girls Gone Wild and all these other crazy stuff that you have in the Western world, this is what gets people's dopamines high in this particular setting in order for them to go out there and buy your pay-per-views or watch your fight. Or you don't have to be like that. You just have to be compelling. Obviously, you don't have to behave in a very haram manner for you to be a star, right? You just have to be able to compel people to wanting to see you fight. Take Khamzat, for example. Now, this brother right here, okay, he's a Muslim fighter, so he obviously doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't do any of these interesting things that you people in the urban hip-hop community or people that are in a certain degenerate mindset would somehow appreciate, right? But the one thing that Khamzat does very good, he tries to play off a gangster role, right? Look at what he does after the Li Jingliang fight. He says, yeah, I'm going to go and unalive everybody. Obviously, I can't say it because you don't want to be demonetized in YouTube and, you know, He says a lot of crazy things. He says Allah Akbar, he screams it, he means it to the highest order. These are all good things. These are all very attractive things. These are all the things that, well, quite frankly, really captures the emotions of people, whether they feel strongly against it or whether they are for Kamzat in everything that he stands for. Either way, you are evoking an emotion. So, going back to Tyson Pedro, even with a 6-5 record in the UFC that he has going on, even with that, he should have still tried to promote himself. Because you look at Nate Diaz, he has a 50-50 record, but guess what? He also knows how to attract attention from people around the world. And maybe he may not have done it on purpose, but my goodness, I gotta tell you, it was enough for Nate Diaz to become a popular guy in the way that he is right now. Now look, granted, let's be really honest. If it wasn't for Conor McGregor, we would not give Nate Diaz this type of attention. Let's just be real about it. And part of that reason is because even though Nate Diaz has a compelling personality, a very likable personality, depending on what your taste is, Nate Diaz was never the type of guy to go out and reach for interviews. He wasn't that type of guy. He wasn't the type of guy to go out and market himself, even though he had a very marketable Northern California gangster style mentality. He was that guy. But unfortunately, he didn't want to do the game that Dana White says when he mentions his brother Nick Diaz. He's like, yeah, you know what? This is what Dana White said. I really like Nick. Nick's a good kid. I like him. He's got great personality like we all think he does. The problem is he doesn't like to play the game. And what game is that? Show up to interviews. Show up to do media conferences. Show up to do podcasts. Show up and do content with random people to get your name out there. He didn't want to do any of that. And guess what? I gotta tell you, just like most content creators on YouTube, at first, of course, we all have the problem of being able to garner an audience, right? Even now, I would say I'm not obviously the biggest YouTuber out there, but guess what? I've noticed that I was gaining a little bit more traction nowadays, you know, whereas before I would get, like, let's say maybe 1 or 3 people watching me. Now, let's say maybe 10 people or maybe 20 people at a time are now watching me. And by the way, this is great improvement. Now, how is it that I was able to do this? Well, obviously, it is exactly what Dana White is talking about when he's saying, you got to play the game, my man. And what exactly does he mean by playing the game? Well, for one, I got to tell you, I went and called in on different podcasts to try to get my name out there so that this way I could garner some attention or some new audiences. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe as you guys are watching this. Not only am I giving you guys some hot MMA content right now, I'm literally giving you guys a travel channel, because wherever it is that I drive and wherever it is that I travel to, I'm going to take you guys on my journey. Obviously, I've had some videos that I did in Santa Monica, LA, now today in Sacramento. If you guys want to rewind back from the beginning, I was showing you guys the riverfront of Sacramento, its river, and the West Sacramento point of the riverfront. But anyways, this is what you got to do. You got to go out there and market yourself. You got to go out there and do different things. Put yourself in different situations if the opportunity presents itself. I went out there and did podcasts with some boxing people. I went out and did podcasts or called in podcasts from, let's say, rappers such as Mr. Criminal or other people out there that have channels where they react to, let's say, hip-hop or other forms of combat sports such as boxing or other MMA channels. You got to do different things to get yourself out there. You got to tell people who you are. So I go out and put some of my pictures of my old fights and, you know, all my experiences, talk about some of my experiences training in gyms, being in different hoods, being in different parts of the world. This is what you got to do. to garner attention? How do I separate myself from other YouTube content creators that are doing the same thing when it comes to the MMA topics? How do I separate myself from that? So this is one of the things that these fighters have to think about. They also have to be content creators, and they may not like it. They may look at it as a very bad stigma, or somehow, oh, you're just a podcaster or this and that. They may look at it as a negative thing, but guess what, man? I gotta be honest with you. The reality is this is who you have to be in the modern age of combat sports, and especially if you want to get paid for it. You got to give people a reason to want to see you fight. It can't just be one thing. Oh, well, I'm great at boxing, or I'm great at jiu-jitsu, or I'm great at Muay Thai, and I'm just going to display that. I'm going to let my fighting do the talking. This is not the era for that. We are not in an era where letting your fight do the talking is just that anymore. It's just not that anymore. You have to do more than that. You have to show why people need to watch you. And if you don't, then you're going to get left behind. Look at Belal Muhammad in this particular situation. What happened with him? Look, I love Belal Muhammad, but unfortunately, he doesn't come off as very interesting to a lot of people, and that's troubling for getting this title shot, especially with the win streak that he has going on. This is very troubling. So as a result, I think that he needs to reflect upon what he needs to do in order to garner attention. I get it, bro. I get you don't want to step out of your character. I get you don't want to garner negative attention, or you don't even have to do that. You just have to find a niche about yourself, about what is interesting in terms of what makes you watchable and what makes you palatable for people who want to go see. And that's all there is really to it. You have to stand out. Because if you don't stand out, then guess what? You are just doing yourself a disservice. A disservice to the fact that you are in a world where people are fighting for attention. And winning fights is just not enough. Now, let's take a look at Canelo and his particular case right now, right? This guy, I gotta be honest with you, is going to retire in the most unfair ways that you could possibly think about. Why? Because all these other fighters are going to go home broke, and guess what? Canelo is going to go in his shot, and he's going to completely forget about all you guys. And I'm sorry, but this is just how it is. It's meritocracy at its best, right? Canelo is great at his craft, so therefore he deserves some of this wealth. But at the same time, he also knows how to garner attention. Like, look at this guy right here. Look at this. I'm talking about, just some random things that are going on, in the world that we have today. Check out my man right here doing his little dance. Guess what? I would have just been passing by this random park or this random school or whatever and would have thought nothing by it. But I said, you know what? Look at this guy. He's over here dancing, right? Trying to show a great attention to himself, right? I'm sorry, guys, but you know what? This is what you got to do to garner attention. You got to have a little bit of a dance. Now, look, here, I got to tell you, to be honest, I'm not much of a dancer. I'm certainly nowhere near in a level of dancing that this guy is at. Not one bit. Not close. I'm not going to attempt to dance. It's just not my thing. It's not what I do. But guess what? Look at this guy. He's attracting, attention. He's probably attracting your attention, and he's probably bringing attention to my page as we're doing this. And by the way, I told you guys, you never know what you're going to get in this channel with me, right? The other day, I was doing a live. I ran across one of Mozzie's homies, one of his OGs, as I was popping by, just, randomly filming Oak Park while I was talking about Sean Strickland going at it with some Navy SEALs. Today, I'm telling you guys about Tyson Pedro and his retirement and the horrible nature that comes with that, and I guess the unfairness that you could somehow speak about. But nonetheless, Is it really fair or unfair, or am I just telling the truth in terms of the fact that, hey, you know what? You got to go out there and garner attention. And if you don't garner attention, then you're going to get left behind. No one's going to notice you. You have to do things to grab attention. But also, here's another thing that's really important to talk about that. Just because you garner attention, okay, it doesn't mean that you have to do something that is completely out of your own principle. Okay, like what I said about Kamzat. This guy doesn't have to go out there and do all these weird things that Hollywood people do. But guess what? He can play off as a bad guy, play off as something that is real to himself, but exaggerated a little bit, but still real to himself. However, it is enough to garner the attention that you need in this world where we constantly fight for attention one way or another. So as for Canelo, this man is going to retire with all the money in the world, whether he wins or loses his last fights, or whether he goes on a losing streak from now on. And why is that? Because he knew how to garner attention. And here's the thing, right? You may think that, you know what, Canelo just got lucky. Here's this guy that has all this attention because he's Mexican, but in reality, yes, the Mexicans have always loved boxing, so if he was going to rise through the ranks and kick butt the way that he did early in his career, then naturally they're going to follow him anyway. But what got Canelo even bigger was the fact that he took the time to learn English. And as a result, even if it wasn't perfect English, it was great enough to garner attention. And that right there is the most important aspect of this whole entire matter that we have to understand. In other words, the flaws of his English was even more intriguing than if he was to speak English like me. That's the reality of it. Hey, remember when he said the MFer word towards Caleb Plant, and Caleb Plant said something to the effect of, well, I didn't really call you an MFer, or it wasn't what he was trying to do. But Canelo, not understanding American lingo, not understanding our culture here, he didn't understand the context of what that was meant. It wasn't meant to disrespect his mom in any way. It's just how we talk here in the streets of America when we are talking to, let's say, an opposition or somebody that we hate or somebody that we are currently engaging a certain verbal battle with to some degree. So that's the reality of Canelo Alvarez and his promotion and how he tried to put himself out there in very uncomfortable spaces, such as trying to speak English, let alone try to understand a culture that he is trying to garner attention from, which is America. And even Caleb Plant, look what he did. He tried to speak Spanish on stage, and guess what? That was memorable. So even though he lost to Canelo, he was still memorable. The point of the matter is, as I've gone on for about 34 minutes now, here's the one thesis that you guys have to understand. Stand out. Monetize that attention. Make sure that you merchandise that attention as well. But have a plan for your retirement and make a business out of yourself as a product. Otherwise, you're going to get left behind. And that right there is the story of Tyson Pedro's current retirement as opposed to Canelo Alvarez's future retirement. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hope you guys enjoy this content. And I will be coming out with a new content set to premiere in 1 hour from now. And I urge you guys to check it out. It is talking about Anthony Joshua and his fight with Francis Ngannou this week. Also talking about Amanda Serrano and why she had missed out on her fight this past Saturday, and how Jake Paul refunded the entire crowd that was there. Also talking about Sean O'Malley and his rematch against Chito Vera, now as a champion and Chito as a challenger, breakdowns on that. While also talking about the review of the card of UFC Vegas 87, its upsets and disappointments, and all the exciting things that have happened in that card, including Tyson Pedro, the man that we are talking about in this particular setting right now. Like and subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend. Inshallah, I will see you guys soon.